And another aspect of the topic 1 human rights is being able to explain the role of the Australian Constitution. And this includes the foreign affairs power that is in section 51. And this is where we are looking at express and implied human rights in Australia, which is something that I've mentioned a few times already. So this is the last part of topic 1, and then we'll be moving on to topic 3. So section 51, under the foreign affairs power in this section of the Australian Constitution, the Parliament has the power to make laws for the peace, order and good government of the Commonwealth with respect to external affairs. So this idea of foreign affairs power. So this means that the Commonwealth can enact laws which are a faithful implementation of those international treaties or conventions that Australia is party to. And so that means that it's protecting express and implied human rights in Australia. So it can't enact laws which aren't in line with those international treaties. It has to make sure it's aligned with those treaties and then enact laws that are protecting express and implied human rights that are within Australia. So express rights. The Australian Constitution is protecting express rights in Australia by explicitly detailing 5 human rights which Australians are entitled to enjoy. So those rights that we have in our Constitution are the right to vote in section 41, the protection against acquisition of property on unjust terms, section 51, the right to trial by jury, which we've heard a few times, section 80, freedom of religion, section 116, and prohibition of discrimination on the basis of state of residency. So regardless of what state you live in, you should be treated equally and not discriminated against. The express enshrinement of these human rights in Australia acts to protect the human rights by prohibiting any Commonwealth law, so any federal law that could infringe on those rights. So those 5 rights are not able to be broken in any way. The government cannot pass any legislation that goes against those rights or obstructs them in any way. On the other hand, we also have implied rights. So these are rights that are derived from interpretations of the Australian Constitution, but they're not specifically outlined. So we do have that idea that they're open to interpretation, and different interpretations can contrast each other. So the right to freedom of political communication, the right to free speech, and the right to democratic representation are examples of implied rights in our Constitution. So an example of a case where implied rights were relevant. So in Lang versus the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, or the ABC, in 1997, the High Court confirmed the implied right of free speech in the Constitution, finding that freedom of communication on matters of government and political affairs is an indispensable part of the system of representative government. So this right is limited to what is necessary for the effective operation of the system of representative and responsible government. So it's interesting here how an implied right was relevant in a high court ruling. So even though they're not express rights, they still are important in society, and they still can have a bearing on important decision making and outcomes for people.